Of course, for us, it's the end of the World Series of Poker. 6 weeks of playing, you know, 10 hours a day. My God. You look so forward to it, but at the end, you're like, ah. Oh. And I have 11 bracelets, which is pretty cool, but 3 seconds. So I told my wife last night, I said, honey, well, if I had 3 seconds in the modern era, that's pretty cool. But if I can get 3 seconds in the modern era, maybe I'll get 3 firsts one of these days. So could be 14 bracelets right now, but let's see what the heck we have here. Is that current? 13 million? Wait, how many final tables? That's wrong. That's not current. Okay, so we're talking about some of my top 10 hands, some aggressive tactics. You guys kept the money management stuff in here, really? I don't think we need that today. And some no-limit tips and techniques. I've given this, probably given this seminar, I don't know, 20 or 30 times. I am proud of it. I put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I could make it the best that it could be. So this range is just a little bit too tight today. You don't want to stick to my top 10 hands. I think that for today, let's see what the next slide is. Okay, so for today, depending on what you're doing, depending on, I think for today that it's really not bad to stick to just pairs. And to this slide right here, good game only hands, 5s, 4s, 3s, ace-x suiteds. Now, the ace-x suited is an interesting hand. Yesterday, there were a bunch of times where I just mucked it in early position. A bunch of times I didn't call a raise with it. A few times I did call a raise with it. It just depended on how much, what percentage of my stack. So ace-x suited can be a hand that pays off handsomely, but it's also a high-risk hand. I mean, too often, I was lucky yesterday. I was a short stack. I decided to call a raise with the ace-deuce of diamonds. I just thought that ace-high was good against both opponents that time. I was lucky I was right because it came ace-3-4. And it would have been pretty crappy for me to go out of the main event, even if I was a short stack, with aces with a deuce kicker. So luckily I was right, and I picked up a bluff from one of the other players along the way. I'm looking to play pairs, and I'm looking to, kind of play really, really patiently. And I think what that does is that allows you to have a tight image at the table. And so I managed to keep a super tight image most of the World Series of Poker. And occasionally I'd feel like, all right, it's time to man up. It's time to make a play or two. You haven't really done much. And then sometimes I won't look at my whole cards. Because if I look at my whole cards and it's a 7 deuce, I'm going to wimp out, right? So there's occasionally where I decide, all right, look, you're looking to make a play right now, this round at the World Series of Poker. And, and I'll look for an opportunity maybe for like 15, 20 hands in a row where all I'm really trying to do is re-raise somebody that's weak. That's all I'm trying to do, re-raise someone that's weak. So someone raises it up, I look at them, and my instincts go crazy. This person has nothing, this person has nothing, this person has nothing. If you have instincts that you can trust, that's a great time to make a move. Now, new school theory says that someone's supposed to raise for 2x, 2 times the size of the pot. And the re-raise is supposed to be a small re-raise. I found at the World Series of Poker this year that the small re-raises didn't work as well. Because a lot of players will then take a flop. So if I'm re-raising with a hand I don't even know what it is, maybe it's 4-9 offsuit, I really just kind of want to win it, Wow, here I am teaching people to re-raise without looking at their whole cards. All right, Phil. Good strategy. Seriously, though, you're going to have to do, if you expect to win this event, if you just want to make it through day one, patience is really, really good. And I'm not saying to re-raise players without looking at your cards very often. What I'm saying is once every hour, or maybe once every 2 hours if you really, really, really have trouble pulling the trigger on a bluff, you should be looking to re-raise someone when you have nothing. Just once every hour. Sometimes I'll re-raise someone 5 or 6 times in 1 hour with nothing. And sometimes I won't do it for 4 hours. I'll just fold, 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 fold. Let me play my cards. You know, this theory of raising someone when you think they're weak, getting the re-raise in, the 3-bet, is an important theory. Let's see what the heck else we have here. I'm already way off topic. Aha. Bill. He plays a lot of cards. We've hung out just a little bit. It's hard to get time with him. Yeah. Being aggressive is important. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. I think that personally for me, if I can pick up a lot of chips in a tournament where other people wouldn't have won those chips, then that leads to the concept of free chips, picking up a little lumber, as you will. My friend John Minetti used to say, "Phil, I picked up so much lumber I can build a house." And he did. He'd be out there raising, re-raising, stealing pots, building chips up, but he'd also sometimes be out early. So it's a matter of doing it just right. So often the difference between me when I'm really on and when I'm not quite where I want to be in poker is when I'm making a bet on the flop with a hand. A lot of times I'm afraid if I have, say, a king-jack and the board is, queen 10-4, a lot of times I'll just check. Well, what happens when I check? I allow someone with ace-high to take a bluff at the pot. I allow someone with a pair of 4s to bet the hand. I allow someone with pocket 3s to bet the hand. I allow someone with 7-8 offsuit to bet the hand. Whereas if I just put in a bet myself, right then and there, when it comes king-jack, queen 10-4, a lot of times I'm just going to win the hand. So I think it's important to bet flops, whether you're drawing or whether you actually have a hand. You could have queen-jack here on the queen 10-4 board. Sometimes my first thought is, I don't want to lose very much money. I have queen-jack. It's queen 10-4. I don't want to lose much money. Sometimes by not betting, I'll lose a lot more money. You have to remember that as well. So I think when I'm really sharp, I'm firing on a flop like this with queen-jack or king-jack or whatever and putting the other people to a little decision. We're not talking about a lot of money at this point. We're talking about putting a bet in on the flop. Being aggressive on the queen 10-4 flop. Again, if you have queen-jack, if you have king-jack, and you check it, you're allowing your opponent to take the lead, and it could lead to some bad things. Whereas if you just fire, you might just win it. Maybe your bet drives the 4-5 out of the pot. Maybe your bet drives the ace-9 out of the pot. Damn well better. Bush and Condi. That's a nice picture. I don't know. I'm not a political person, so I do know that I grew up watching like the Bush blooper reel. So, but when I met him in person, he was like the sharpest guy ever. I'm like, what? So I was kind of surprised. No, I'm not saying anything negative. I'm just saying, how they put all that BS, that's all you'd see on TV is him messing up something. But the guy's like sharp, All right, let's move on. Okay, I'm not sure we need this today. Yeah, I don't think we need this one. This is good. This is good at the seminars that I do, or Camp Hellmuth, or the other things I do, because we can talk about, going out to Reno for a week and playing in a poker tournament. Maybe I'll go through this kind of quickly. Let's go for an example. So I think it's important. I think the whole thing about this money management thing is to kind of stick to your game plan. So if you want to go to Reno for a week and play in X tournaments, stick to your game plan. Just seems like most of us, when we go to a tournament like that, we bring our $2,160 or whatever it was with us, and then what happens is we're out of the first tournament, we're like, oh, now what? Well, let's play a side game. It's happened to me multiple times as I was coming up, where I'd then lose all the money the first day. Not good. Now you have to borrow money from a friend or whatever. I just think that I've learned it's important to stick to whatever money management plan you set up in advance. We probably don't need much of this today, so let's move on. Oh yeah, this works well if you're Phil Gordon. Start a business in Silicon Valley, make a fortune, life is good. Then start playing poker. I think that last point's salient. I think it's important to understand that if you're going to be a professional poker player, eventually you're going to go broke. It's one thing if you actually have already made millions of dollars, but everybody that starts out in this business eventually swoons. Second year, third year, fifth year, whatever. So I think it's important to be able to handle this, because I've seen so many of my friends fall to alcohol and drugs, and I guess I just wasn't raised that way. I'm not a drug guy. I still go out to the clubs, but I'm not like a huge drinker. Phil, did you wander up here for a reason? Okay. If I'm going to whip you, you want to be close so everybody can see? Aha! I can dodge bullets, baby. Anybody drink any of that Milwaukee's Best stuff? I knew you came up here for a reason. I said I'm not a big drinker. I like that. That's what I sent you? Pictures of me, Clinton, Bush, and like frickin' me in a beer can? Oh, God, the ego of this guy on the stage. He really has to watch this. Okay. Well, I kind of like this 10-deuce story. You guys ready for a story? Okay. So I'm in the main event, and I'm playing at Daniel Negreanu's table, and I just have a read on him, a really good read. For some reason, I don't know, I'm usually able to read all the pros, but Daniel plays a lot of hands, so he's a good guy to have a read on. And so he raised it under the gun, and he opened for $10,000. And I just looked at him and I said, this guy has 6 high. I know he has 6 high. So I'm going to make it $30,000 to go with my 10 deuce of diamonds, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm looking for that read, right, for that edge. And I just, in my mind, I kept flashing 6 high, 6 high, 6 high. And so I made it $30,000 to go. And of course, we're in the main event. There's probably, I don't know, 30 players left in 01. And the guy behind me, John Hennigan, apparently had a good read on me, because he made it 30,100 to go all in, or something like that. I guess maybe it was 4,000 or 5,000 more for me to call. So I had an easy call. The problem is that they just introduced the rule where you had to show the whole cards. So this wasn't good, because I had kind of a tight image at my table. So they flipped my hand up, and they flipped John Hennigan's hand up, and he had 2 9s. And I had the 10 deuce of diamonds, and so now there's 3 tables left and a whole room full of people. It's the World Series of Poker, man. The announcer's like, and John Hennigan has 2 9s, and Phil Hellmuth has the 10 deuce of diamonds. I'm like, oh, God, this is horrible. There goes my whole image, you know? And they dealt the cards off, and it came 8, 7, 4, 3, and bam! The river was at 10, and I had this egg all over my face. I won the pot. Um, I shook hands. John Hennigan, I apologized profusely to him for the bad beat. And it turns out that, you know, I had about 330,000 in front of me before the hand started. So maybe it was, yeah, 330. And so they'd reported that I was like all in on the internet or something. So the fact of the matter is I put 10% of my chips in on this hand. See what else we have here. So yeah, if you're one that doesn't like to occasionally not look at your hand, the reason I suggest occasionally not looking at your hand is, again, one of your senses just goes off. You look at a guy. You don't always want to work this hard, okay? You don't always want to sit there. This is the way I feel. If you're playing in a no-limit hold'em tournament, you only have so much energy, okay? And if you're going to sit there and try to read everybody, every single hand, you're making a mistake. Because a lot of those hands don't come to showdown anyway. And so you spend all this time and energy and effort studying someone and studying someone else and the raise and the re-raise. You don't get to see the hands anyway. You know what I'm saying? So I don't actually think that it's that important to play, to try to watch everybody every single hand. I think rather for me, especially this year, I'm just trying to relax at the table, you know. I'm trying to listen to my music, or I don't mind carrying on conversation occasionally. But for me, so there are times, now I know that I have a tight image, where I think it is important then. I don't know, I'm trying to describe to you the exact time maybe you'd want to consider re-raising someone with nothing. Certainly you want to do it on the button or on the cutoff. Certainly you want to do it from the small blind or the big blind because you have less people behind you, so that you never get caught by someone who decides to play the 2 9s when you're making a move with nothing. So again, maybe once an hour. Maybe it's better for you to think in terms of once a level. Just one of those pots per level that you get away with. And here's the other thing. If you decide, hey, I'm going to try this fill thing, and I wouldn't even try it without the antes. Come on, you can sit in this tournament and just fold and basically just play your cards, and there's a good chance you're going to end up with a lot of chips if you're a patient player. But if you want to try this, then maybe try it when the antes start. And if you get away with it the first time, that tells you something. You have a pretty good read on the player that you tried it on. Okay? So let's just say you try it again an hour later. We're talking about not looking at your whole cards, or maybe looking at your whole cards and seeing ace-deuce. Maybe you have ace-9. Maybe you actually have an ace in your hand, and you're just like your instincts are going off. This guy has nothing. This guy has nothing. Put the re-raise in and find out if he has nothing. Now, if you're a player, we have a lot of people that haven't played a lot of poker here. We have a lot of people that have played a lot of poker here. If you're someone that, if you find that you've gotten away with 3 out of 3, that's a pretty good sign. There are tournaments where I'll make this move 17 times and I'll win all 17. And that tells me something. That's like, Phil, you're really reading well. You probably should have done a little bit more often. Because there's a lot of times where someone raises them like they're weak, they're weak, they're weak, but you can't raise every time you think someone's weak. So I'm folding anyway a lot of times. And so I think, though, that if you look at the history of poker, someone like Stu Unger did actually take it to that next level where he just, every time he thought somebody was weak, he re-raised. Stu, of course, was an amazing player. He was a little bit like John Benetti, some ups and some downs, but a lot of ups in there. So for you yourself personally, keep track of every time you've re-raised someone with a hand you wouldn't normally re-raise someone with, whether you're in the dark, whether it's an ace high. Okay, and you might find that you've gotten away with 15 out of 15. And you might find that maybe that's the reason you're still in the tournament after 2 or 3 days, is because of those moves. You have to go with your reads, though. And if you're not reading people well on a particular day, and that happens to me, I'm like, man, I mean, I re-raised him. How could he have something? He just didn't look like he had anything that time. Occasionally, you know that your reads are just a little bit off. That's fine. Just go back into a shell. Maybe after the dinner break, try again. Maybe the next day, try again. I think it's important to be super patient to give yourself a chance to make it through day 1 and day 2. I've been coaching some of my friends from the Bay Area. I don't normally do that, but I've been coaching them a little bit, and you know, I've been telling them, look, I told them when they were there late in day 1, they had chips. I said, you know how you make it through the end of the day? They said, no. I said, here's what you do. You raise, you're both tight players, you both have a tight image. Try raising for 3 or 4x. You really want to make it to the end of the day, come in for a 4x raise every time. The blinds are 1 and 2, you open for $800. You should see the look on people's faces when you open for $800, a 4x raise. They're like, what? This tight player just made it 4x? And so both of my friends made it through the end of the day, and they, you know, employed that strategy. Of course, there's nothing on the screen about that. Yeah, you know, when you're talking about, you know, picking up hands before the pot, and I think that so many people are aware of the fact that you're trying to pick up pots before the flop. Even I was getting re-raised a lot yesterday by the field. So it's interesting that I can play with a lot of professional players or a lot of players that have been around a long time, and they're not re-raising me as often as some of the amateurs. And the amateurs, I think, sometimes they're like, well, I have 2 4s. I'm going to re-raise Phil, you know. Thanks for that. You know, I'm in there with like the king, queen suited. I can't call the raise in general. I think that I think the next slide is, let's see. Yeah, I like 3-betting a little bit more, so let's go back. So picking up hands before the flop. Look, the beautiful thing about this is sometimes, occasionally, you find yourself at a table where the people on your left are folding a lot. Again, let's talk about with antes, okay? Without antes, picking up a lot of pots doesn't really help that much. But once the antes start, you can really start to accumulate some driftwood. But these days, I think that it's a lot more effective to be 3-betting, and the numbers kind of bear that out. So if you're raising, a lot of times people will be doing what I'm telling you to do. They'll be re-raising you with nothing. And a lot of times your hands are just tied. What can you do? You just want to 4-bet it in the World Series of Poker. So you open, they raise you. You want to just 4-bet it against them? No. Probably not the best idea. So I like the 3-betting, and you make a lot more money when you do it. See the new data there? That's a data point added by Gordon and his team, right? And it's true. The new data does show that 3-bets work over 70% of the time. So why don't you just 3-bet every single hand? Well, once you get a reputation as a super fast player, it's not going to work 70% of the time. But, so my favorite play is coming over the top. I probably didn't do enough of that yesterday because I made the mistake of flopping a flush against someone who flopped middle pair. Didn't work out very well for me yesterday. So yeah, let's look at this example. I like this. 1 and 2 blinds, 25 ante. So they opened for 500. You amended the whole slide, didn't you, Phil? So yeah, pretty much these days people will open for 500 or 450. I guess that's all internet-based. And then you see if they raise and you re-raise how much you're going to win. You're going to win the 1 and 200 blinds, everybody's ante, their bet, and you end up with a play that works 70% of the time, picking up a free $1,000 in chips. If you want to win the World Series of Poker, if you want to win a no-limit tournament, you have to find a way to pick up chips risk-free. Okay? I don't have all the titles I have, because I sat there and just played the cards. And yet, there are a lot of times where I'll just spend 4 hours just playing the cards. Just, all right, I just have to fold, I have to fold. There's aggressive players at the table. Maybe my read's not right. It's important to take a break sometimes and relax. But if you want to win at No Limit Hold'em, you have to find a way to pick up chips risk-free. And so what happened with the internet kids is they all went crazy 3-betting all the time. So they came into poker, they 3-bet. They told Phil Gordon and I and all the other pros, established pros, we're better than you are because we know how to 3-bet and 4-bet. Like we hadn't been doing that since the frickin' 80s. You know, and most of those kids are now, you know, most of these kids that were considered the greatest poker players on the planet to each other are already busted and back and wherever doing whatever. So they came in and they played, they used this move too much. And they had success once or twice a year with it, but they used it too much. And so now you see a lot of the internet kids reloaded. I like that. The internet kids reloaded. Because the great internet kids that are around today are friends with people like Phil Gordon and I. We get along. There's a really strong rapport now. We get along well with all the internet kids. And there's a mutual respect there. And the crazy kids that did too much of this stuff, again, are at home, wherever that may be. They're not playing in the main event. So you have to use this, but not too often. I guess that's what I'm saying. I also think some of these internet kids, it would blow my mind in 2008 when they'd report a hand like it was some kind of really cool thing where someone 3-bet it, someone 4-bet it, someone 5-bet it. And the reporter would speculate, this guy had nothing and this guy had nothing. No. One of them actually had a hand, and the other guy was an internet kid. I don't like this style. I'll present it here, but I just don't like it. I think that maybe this style's a little bit better today because they only make it, because their raises are so small. So it's interesting. For me, 8-9 suited, 7-8 suited, these hands are hands that I didn't like to play for 3x raises because I'd get myself in trouble all the time, right? You call a raise with 7-8 suited. Okay, yeah, sometimes it comes 6-9-10, great. Then do you get paid off? A lot of times you don't make any money after you hit the perfect flop. But I always hate it when it comes Jack-8 deuce. And you're sitting there with the 7-8 of diamonds, and you have 2 or 3 opponents. Now what? Right? And so I took those out of my equation. The reason why, I would rather 3-bet with nothing, with 9 deuce offsuit, than call a raise with the 7-8 of diamonds. I would rather do that because I've discovered that my reading is good, and I'm going to win that hand with 9 deuce offsuit before the flop. If I'm calling with 7-8 of diamonds and I flop an 8 on the Jack-8 deuce board, now I'm in trouble. Now I don't know what to do. I could hit an 8 and still lose. I could hit a 7 and still lose. Maybe I'm against Ace-Jack. Maybe it comes a running 3-4 and I end up paying off Ace-Jack. So I think that I'm the only one that would say so. But Daniel is great at that. He will call a raise with 8-9 suited. He'll call a raise with 4-5 suited. He'll call a raise with ace-deuce suited. And he's going to absolutely, he plays these hands so well. If you feel that you can play hands well, I'm not going to tell you not to call a raise with 8-9 suited. I'm going to say that if you're really good at reading your opponents, maybe you can make that play. Yesterday, I don't think that I made that play very often, personally. Again, I'd rather re-raise with nothing than get myself in a spot on a Jack-8 deuce board. So I'm not going to tell you not to play these hands. Negreanu's amazing at it. There's a lot of great players that are amazing at it. I like cutting a lot of the fat out. You know, I like winning pots. I like winning pots without seeing flops. Okay, I kind of like this one. So in 1989, it was 90, I had won a ton of No Limit Hold'em tournaments. And For some reason, I had never made it. I had never won a limit hold'em tournament. In fact, I don't think I'd ever made a limit hold'em final table. So I had 5 or 6 titles already by 1990, but I'd never made a limit hold'em final table. Never mind won a title. I said, well, there's got to be something that I'm doing wrong here, because obviously, when it comes to no limit, I'm there all the time. So what did I do? Jack Keller, at the time, was the, I don't know, I guess today we'd call him the limit hold'em tournament spook. He was down there all the time. And so I spent an entire day. I said, what am I going to do today? I'm not going to play the limit hold'em tournament. I'm going to go watch Jack Keller play. Now, Keller, of course, a crotchety guy from Philadelphia, knew that I was watching him, and you could see the fire in his eyes. He was mad that I was watching him and trying to learn from him, you know what I mean? He could see me on the rail studying him, and he was, like, offended, you know? And I'm like, Jack, I'm studying it. I have so much respect for your play. And he's like, can you do that? I'm like, Jack, there's a rail over here. You know, it's all right. And he was so mad, I'll never forget. But I watched him play all day long, and it opened a light. Wow, that's what he's doing. Jack Keller, 3 bets every single hand he plays in limit hold'em. Every single hand. And because of that, he's driving people out of the pot, putting himself in positions where it looks like he's super strong, and you know, and he's able to bet a lot of flops. If he 3 bets with 2 4s in his hand, and it comes ace, jack, deuce, say the guy raced with king, queen. Now Jack will bet again, and he'll win the pot. He doesn't have to show his hand. Whereas I would just call with the force, try to let 4 or 5 people in. Maybe someone else does call 9, 10 suited, and it comes ace, jack, deuce. Now the king, queen bets, and I'm like, I missed my set, I fold. Jack Keller 3 bets, it gets its heads up, and he wins that pot, where I used to lose that pot. The point of the story is that learn from the best. And so you might be watching televised poker and see something that you really like. Wow, this guy seems to do this really well. I think I'm going to use that in my game. I like this one. That's the golden boy. Oh, you marked it. I'm surprised you know who this is. Oh, I guess you can read the writing up there, huh, Phil? You know who Paul Hornung is? Okay. I like this. 50 years ago, I was playing at the Dunes with Doyle Brunson, lost my ass. Paul Hornung. Of course, Paul Hornung did get banned for gambling from the NFL one year. He played my charity tournament recently. Okay. So I think now what are we going to do? Open up for questions, Phil? Or are we out of time?
Yeah. Round of applause for Phil Hellmuth.